Victoria grabbed Eleanor's wrists and shoved hard. The 68-year-old woman stumbled forward, her knees cracking against cold concrete, her hands grasping at empty air before slamming into steel bars. The cage door crashed shut. Eleanor spun around her chest, heaving, her eyes flooding with terror. "Victoria, what are you doing?" Victoria crouched down, her red gown pooling around her, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Keeping things perfect," she whispered. "Just for tonight." She stood, pocketed the key, killed the lights, and climbed the stairs without looking back. Above her, 200 guests clinked champagne glasses and laughed at clever jokes. Below her, Eleanor Harper pressed her face against the bars and screamed her son's name into darkness that swallowed every sound. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? Drop your city and the time there in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you need to see how this ends. Victoria Harper had been practicing her smile since 4 in the morning. She stood in her bathroom, leaning close to the mirror, adjusting the corners of her mouth until the expression looked natural. Warm, but not desperate. Confident, but not arrogant. The smile of a woman who belonged among Connecticut's elite. "Perfect," she whispered to her reflection. "You are perfect." But her reflection didn't believe her. Her reflection knew the truth. Today was October 15th. The day Victoria had been planning for 6 months. The day she would host the most exclusive charity gala Greenwich had seen in years. The day she would finally prove to everyone, to the society wives who whispered behind her back, to the old money families who looked through her like glass, to her own husband who still called his mother every single morning, that Victoria Harper was somebody. She gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles turned white. "You can do this," she told herself. "You have to do this." Her phone buzzed. A text from the event coordinator confirming the final guest count. 212 confirmed attendees. The mayor, 3 state senators, the Hendersons who owned half of Stamford, the Blackwoods whose money was so old it practically had dust on it. Everyone who mattered would be in her home tonight. Victoria allowed herself one moment of triumph. Then she heard footsteps downstairs, and her stomach dropped. She knew those footsteps. Soft, careful, accompanied by the faint smell of something homemade. Eleanor was here. Victoria found her mother-in-law in the kitchen unpacking a casserole dish with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "Good morning, dear," Eleanor said without turning around. "I made Marcus's favorite. Thought he might want something comforting before the big night." Victoria's jaw tightened. "We have caterers coming, professional caterers, from New York." "Oh, I know." Eleanor turned her smile gentle, her eyes warm. "This is just a little something extra. You know how much he loves my cooking." There it was. That innocent tone. That sweet, harmless delivery. And underneath it, the reminder that Eleanor knew Marcus better than Victoria ever would. That Eleanor could give him things Victoria couldn't. That Eleanor would always come first. "Thank you," Victoria managed. "You can leave it on the counter. I was thinking I could help you set up today. 4 hands are better than 2. Everything is handled." "I'm sure it is, but I'd love to contribute somehow. This is such an important night for you." "Eleanor." Victoria's voice sharpened before she could stop it. "I said everything is handled." Eleanor's smile faltered. For a moment something flickered in her eyes. Hurt confusion. Victoria couldn't tell and didn't care. "Of course, dear. I didn't mean to overstep." "You're not overstepping. I just have a very specific vision for tonight, and I need to execute it without distractions." The word hung in the air between them. Distractions. Eleanor set down the casserole dish slowly. "I understand." "Good." Victoria turned to leave, but Eleanor's voice stopped her. "Victoria." "What?" "Are you sleeping enough? You look tired." The concern in Eleanor's voice made Victoria's skin crawl. It sounded genuine. It always sounded genuine. That was the worst part. I'm fine. It's just that you've been working so hard. I worry about you. Don't. I can't help it. Your family. Victoria spun around. Am I? Because sometimes it feels like I'm just the woman who married your son. The woman you've been waiting to fail since the day we met. Eleanor's face went pale. That's not true. Isn't it? Victoria. I have never wanted you to fail. I've only ever wanted Marcus to be happy. And you don't think he's happy with me? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. That pause, that single heartbeat of hesitation told Victoria everything she needed to know. That's what I thought. Victoria's voice turned to ice. Enjoy your casserole. She walked out before Eleanor could respond. Behind her, Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly, a feeling of dread settling into her bones that she couldn't explain. Marcus appeared 20 minutes later, still rumpled from sleep, his hair sticking up in 3 directions. His face lit up the moment he saw the casserole dish. Mom, is that your famous breakfast bake? I wanted to surprise you. Eleanor hugged him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her only child. Big day today. The biggest. Marcus grabbed a fork and dug in without bothering with a plate. God, I've missed this. Vicky doesn't really cook, so we usually just order in or... Marcus! Victoria's voice cut through from the doorway. Both Marcus and Eleanor turned. The florists are here. I need you to sign for the delivery. Can't you sign for it? It's in your name. They need your signature. Marcus sighed, setting down the fork. Okay. Mom, save some for me. Of course, sweetheart. He kissed Eleanor's cheek and headed toward the front door. The moment he was gone, Victoria stepped into the kitchen. We need to talk about tonight. Eleanor straightened. I'm listening. I need you to understand how important this evening is to me. Everything needs to be perfect. Everything. Do you understand? I understand. Do you? Because perfect means no surprises, no unexpected comments, no heartwarming stories about Marcus's childhood that make everyone realize I wasn't there for any of them. Eleanor's expression shifted. Victoria, I would never intentionally embarrass you. It's not about intention. It's about awareness. You don't realize how you come across sometimes, how people respond to you, how Marcus responds to you. How does Marcus respond to me? Victoria laughed bitterly. Like you hung the moon. Like you're the only woman in the world who matters. Like I'm just temporary. That's not true. I see the way he looks at you. I see the way he relaxes around you. He's never relaxed around me. Not like that. Not ever. Eleanor reached out her hand, hovering near Victoria's arm. Sweetheart, Marcus loves you. He chose you. He married you. Don't call me sweetheart. Eleanor's hand dropped. I'm sorry. Just stay out of my way tonight. Can you do that? Can you just blend into the background for once and let me have this one thing? The words landed like blows. Eleanor absorbed them silently, her face a mask of carefully controlled pain. I'll do my best, she finally said. Good. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. And Eleanor. The casserole. Marcus doesn't need it. We're having Eggs Benedict catered from the Harbor Club. She walked out, leaving Eleanor alone with a dish of food no one wanted, and a growing certainty that something was very, very wrong with her daughter-in-law. The hours crawled by in a blur of controlled chaos. Victoria commanded her small army of staff like a general preparing for war. Every flower arrangement was inspected. Every place setting was measured. Every lighting angle was approved or rejected based on how it would photograph. The roses are crooked, she snapped at a florist. Fix them. The champagne isn't cold enough, she told a caterer. It needs to be exactly 45 degrees. The string quartet is too loud, she informed the event coordinator. Tell them to play at 70% volume until dinner is served." The staff learned quickly to avoid eye contact and follow orders without question. They had seen demanding clients before, but Victoria Harper was something else entirely. There was a desperation beneath her perfectionism, a barely contained panic that made everyone nervous. At 3 o'clock, Victoria retreated to her bedroom to prepare. She had laid out everything the night before: the red Valentino gown that cost more than her father used to make in 6 months, the diamond earrings Marcus had given her for their anniversary, the Louboutin heels that pinched her feet but made her legs look incredible. She stripped off her clothes and stood in front of the full-length mirror, examining every inch of herself. 32 years old, still young, still beautiful, still worthy of the life she had clawed her way into. But the mirror showed her things she didn't want to see. The slight softness around her waist that no amount of Pilates could eliminate. The fine lines beginning to form around her eyes. The permanent tension in her shoulders that never fully relaxed. "You're enough," she whispered, echoing words she had read in a self-help book. "You are enough." The words felt hollow. They always felt hollow. A knock at the door made her jump. "Vicky," Marcus's voice. "Can I come in?" She grabbed a robe, wrapping it around herself. "Yes." He entered, already dressed in his tuxedo, looking effortlessly handsome in the way that people with old money always seem to look, like he had been born wearing designer clothes, like he had never known a moment of doubt in his entire privileged life. "You look stressed," he said. "I'm fine." "You've been saying that all day. You've been saying that all week, actually." "Because I'm fine." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Hey, look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "This party is going to be amazing," he said. "You've worked so hard. Everyone's going to be blown away. But even if something goes wrong, even if a waiter drops a tray or the power goes out or a guest gets too drunk, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. What matters is us, you and me. Okay." Victoria wanted to believe him. She wanted to melt into his arms and let him convince her that everything would be fine. But she couldn't. She had been melting into people's arms her whole life, trusting them to catch her, and they never did. Not really. Not when it mattered. "Okay," she lied. He kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I love you too. I should go check on Mom. Make sure she's ready." And there it was, the knife sliding between her ribs so smoothly she almost didn't feel it. "Of course," Victoria said, her voice flattening. "Go check on your mother." Marcus didn't notice the shift. He was already heading for the door, his mind already elsewhere, his attention already belonging to someone else. "See you downstairs in an hour. First guests arrive at 6:30. He disappeared, and Victoria stood alone in her bedroom, surrounded by expensive things that suddenly felt worthless. She finished getting ready in silence. The gown fit perfectly. The diamonds sparkled. The heels made her tall and powerful. She looked exactly like the woman she had always wanted to become. So why did she feel like a fraud? At 5:45, Victoria descended the staircase to inspect the final preparations. Everything looked immaculate. The house practically glowed with sophistication and wealth. She found Eleanor in the corner of the living room, straightening a flower arrangement that was already perfectly straight. Her mother-in-law had changed into a simple navy dress with pearl earrings. She looked elegant in an understated way that required no effort, no money, no performance. The kind of elegance Victoria had spent her entire life trying to manufacture and never quite achieved. "That arrangement is fine," Victoria said sharply. Eleanor startled, nearly knocking over a vase. You were just fussing. Stop fussing. Everything is perfect." "I'm sorry. I was trying to help." "I don't need your help. I need you to stand in a corner and smile and not draw attention to yourself. Can you manage that?" Eleanor's face crumpled slightly, then smoothed over with practiced composure. "Yes, I can manage that." "Good." Victoria started to walk away, but Eleanor's voice followed her. "Victoria, wait. There's something I need to tell you." Victoria's blood pressure spiked. "Not now." It's important. I said not now. It can't wait. Victoria whirled around. What? What could possibly be so important that it can't wait until after my party? Eleanor's hands twisted together nervously. Earlier today I was looking for the iron in your office closet. I didn't mean to pry, but I found something. The world seemed to slow down. Victoria's heart began to pound. What did you find? Letters. From collection agencies. About credit card debt. Victoria stopped breathing. Victoria, is everything okay? Financially, I mean. Those letters mentioned joint accounts. Accounts with Marcus's name on them. You had no right to go through my things. I wasn't going through anything. I was looking for the iron, and the letters were right there on the shelf. They fell out when I moved a box. You had no right. Does Marcus know? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her vision tunneled. Her hands started to shake. That is none of your business. If my son is in financial trouble, it absolutely is my business. He's not in trouble. I'm handling it. Handling it. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping. Victoria, those letters said $50,000. That's not handling it. That's drowning. Shut up. He deserves to know. I said shut up. Victoria's voice rang through the room. Two housekeepers froze mid-step, turning to stare. Victoria lowered her voice to a vicious whisper. You don't know anything about my marriage. You don't know anything about our finances. And you certainly don't have the right to dig through my personal belongings and then lecture me about my choices. I'm not lecturing. I'm concerned. No, you're delighted. You finally have proof that I'm not good enough for your precious son. That's not what this is. That's exactly what this is. You've been waiting 3 years for me to fail, and now you think you've found your ammunition. Eleanor shook her head. Victoria, listen to me. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt Marcus. But secrets like this destroy marriages. If you don't tell him the truth, are you threatening me? I'm trying to help you. By blackmailing me, by holding this over my head on the most important night of my life. That's not what I'm doing. Then promise me you won't say anything to Marcus. Not tonight. Not until I have a chance to explain things on my own terms. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes searched Victoria's face, looking for something, honesty perhaps, or remorse. I won't say anything tonight, she finally said. But tomorrow, you need to have a conversation with him. A real conversation. Relief flooded through Victoria, immediately followed by rage. Eleanor was controlling her. Eleanor had power over her now. Eleanor could destroy everything with a single conversation. Fine, Victoria spat. Tomorrow. And Victoria. What? Eleanor's voice softened with something that almost sounded like compassion. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're trying to prove to yourself or to the world, it's not worth losing your soul over. Trust me, I've lived long enough to know. Victoria stared at her mother-in-law, hatred and fear, and something that might have been shame churning in her chest. Save your wisdom for someone who wants it. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble like the countdown to something terrible. The first guests arrived at 6:32. Victoria stationed herself at the entrance with Marcus, greeting each arrival with the smile she had practiced all morning. The mayor and his wife. The Hendersons and their twin sons, who both worked in venture capital. Business associates from Marcus's firm. Society columnists who would write glowing features about the event. What a stunning home, Mrs. Henderson gushed. Thank you so much, Victoria responded. We're thrilled you could join us. The decorations are absolutely exquisite. You're too kind. The compliments flowed like expensive wine, and Victoria drank them in greedily. Each flattering word was a brick in the wall she was building around herself. Each admiring glance was proof that she belonged here, that she had earned her place, that she was worthy. But even as she smiled and laughed and performed, her eyes kept drifting to Eleanor. Her mother-in-law stood in a corner near the string quartet, holding a glass of sparkling water and chatting with an elderly couple Victoria didn't recognize. She looked perfectly comfortable, perfectly at ease, like she had been attending events like this her entire life. Which of course she had. Eleanor had grown up in this world. She had married into money just like Victoria had, but somehow it was different. Somehow Eleanor had absorbed wealth and privilege without losing her warmth, her authenticity, her genuine connection to people. Victoria watched as the elderly couple laughed at something Eleanor said. She watched as Eleanor touched the woman's arm with easy affection. She watched as more people gravitated toward her mother-in-law, drawn by some invisible force that Victoria could never seem to generate, no matter how hard she tried. The hatred burned brighter. At 7:15, Victoria found Eleanor speaking with Margaret Blackwood, the matriarch of the oldest, wealthiest family in Greenwich. Margaret was notoriously difficult to impress, but she was laughing openly at something Eleanor had said. Victoria inserted herself into the conversation immediately. "Eleanor, I see you've met Margaret." "Oh, we go way back," Margaret said warmly. "Eleanor and I volunteered together at Greenwich Hospital in the 80s. Before you were born, dear." The casual dismissal stung. Before you were born. A reminder that Victoria was an outsider, a newcomer, someone who hadn't been part of this world long enough to have history with anyone. "How wonderful," Victoria managed. "Margaret, there's someone I'd love to introduce you to, if you don't mind." She guided Margaret away before Eleanor could say another word, shooting her mother-in-law a warning glance as she went. For the next hour, Victoria worked the room relentlessly. She laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She pretended to care about summer homes and yacht clubs and private school admissions. She performed the role of perfect hostess with every ounce of energy she possessed. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to fall apart. At 8:12, it did. Victoria was speaking with Senator Morrison when she heard a crash behind her. She spun around to see Eleanor standing near one of the display tables, her face white with horror. At her feet lay the shattered remains of a crystal vase, a $3,000 piece that Victoria had personally selected from a gallery in Venice. The room went quiet. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the commotion. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor gasped. "I didn't see it. My elbow caught the edge." Victoria crossed the room in quick strides, her heels striking the floor like hammer blows. "What happened?" "It was an accident. I'll pay for it. Do you have any idea how much that cost?" "I didn't mean—" "You never mean anything, do you?" Victoria's voice was low, meant only for Eleanor's ears, but several nearby guests could hear. "You just stumble around destroying things and expect everyone to forgive you because you're so sweet and harmless." "Victoria, please. How could you be so careless? It was an accident." "Was it? Or was this your way of reminding everyone that you're here, that you matter, that even on my night, you still have to be the center of attention?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I would never—" "Save it." Marcus appeared at Victoria's elbow, his face tight with concern. "What's going on?" "Your mother broke my vase. The Venetian one." "It was an accident." Eleanor repeated, her voice trembling. "Marcus, I feel terrible. I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Mom." Marcus put his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, drawing her close. "It's just a vase. No one's hurt. These things happen." Victoria stared at her husband. At the easy way he comforted his mother. At the way his entire body softened when Eleanor was near. At the way he hadn't even asked if Victoria was okay. "Just a vase." Her voice rose slightly. "That vase cost $3,000. I spent weeks finding it. It was supposed to be the centerpiece of the Vicky. Marcus's tone hardened. "Let it go. Let it go." As if her feelings didn't matter. As if her months of planning didn't matter. As if she didn't matter. "Of course." Victoria's voice went cold. "You're absolutely right. It's fine. Everything is fine." She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus to comfort his mother while guests whispered and stared. In the hallway, Victoria pressed her back against the wall and forced herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. The edges of her vision had gone dark with rage. She had to calm down. She had to regain control. She had to. The idea came to her then, dark and terrible and impossible to ignore. What if Eleanor wasn't at the party? What if she simply disappeared? Victoria shook her head. That was insane. She couldn't actually do something like that. But the thought wouldn't leave. It burrowed into her brain like a parasite, feeding on her anger and fear and desperation. The basement. The old dog cage from Marcus's German Shepherd who had died 2 years ago. It was still down there collecting dust. No, it was crazy. It was criminal. It was Victoria. She jumped. Eleanor stood at the end of the hallway, her face still wet with tears. I wanted to apologize again. I feel just awful about the vase. It's fine. It's not fine. I can see how upset you are. Eleanor stepped closer. I think I should leave. I'm only making things worse by being here. A rational person would have agreed. A rational person would have accepted the gracious offer and moved on with the evening. But Victoria was not feeling rational. No, she heard herself say. Don't leave. Eleanor blinked. Really? Really? I overreacted. The vase doesn't matter. What matters is that we're family, and family supports each other. The words tasted like poison, but Victoria forced them out. Actually, I need your help with something. Of course, anything. There are some extra decorations in the basement. I completely forgot about them. Could you help me carry them up? Eleanor hesitated. Something flickered in her eyes, instinct perhaps, or the accumulated wisdom of 68 years. But she had spent her entire life giving people the benefit of the doubt. It was her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. Of course, dear. I'd be happy to help. Victoria smiled. Follow me. She led Eleanor toward the basement door, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every step felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. Every second gave her a chance to turn back. She didn't turn back. The basement stairs creaked as they descended. Victoria went first, her hand trailing along the wall, her mind screaming at her to stop. At the bottom, Eleanor looked around. I don't see any decorations. They're in the corner, behind that old cage. Eleanor walked toward the back of the basement, squinting in the dim light. I still don't see. Victoria grabbed her from behind. It happened so fast that Eleanor barely had time to react. She stumbled forward, her knees hitting concrete, her hands scrabbling for purchase on cold steel bars. The cage door slammed shut with a sound that seemed to echo forever. Eleanor spun around, her eyes wide with shock and terror. Victoria, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago. This is insane. Let me out. No. Victoria, please. Eleanor's hands wrapped around the bars, shaking them desperately. I'm 68 years old. I have arthritis. I can't. This is cruel. You should have thought about that before you went through my things. Before you threatened to tell Marcus about the debt. Before you spent 3 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough. I never meant to make you feel that way. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did. Eleanor's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Victoria, please, I'm begging you. Whatever I did, whatever you think I did, this isn't the answer. Marcus will notice I'm gone. He'll come looking for me. No, he won't, because I'm going to tell him you felt sick and went home. I'm going to tell him you didn't want to ruin the party by making a fuss. He won't believe that. He'll believe whatever I tell him. He always does. Victoria pulled the key from the lock and pocketed it. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. You'll be fine. It's only for a few hours. Once the party is over, I'll let you out. And then what? You think I won't tell him what you did? Victoria crouched down until she was eye level with Eleanor. You can tell him whatever you want. But it'll be your word against mine. The confused old woman, who wandered into the basement and got lost versus the devoted wife who searched the entire house looking for her. Who do you think he'll believe? Eleanor stared at her daughter-in-law, as though seeing her for the first time. You're not the person I thought you were. No, I'm not. Victoria stood. I'm the person you forced me to become. She turned toward the stairs. Victoria, wait. Eleanor's voice cracked with desperation. Please, don't leave me down here. Victoria paused at the bottom of the stairs. For one moment, one brief flickering moment, she felt something that might have been doubt. Then she remembered Eleanor's hesitation when asked if Marcus was happy. She remembered the letters. She remembered 3 years of feeling second best in her own marriage. She climbed the stairs without looking back. Victoria. She turned off the light. Victoria. She closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a sound that seemed to seal something much larger than a basement door. Victoria stood in the hallway, breathing hard, her whole body trembling. She had done it. She had actually done it. Above her, the party continued. Music played, glasses clinked. 200 people laughed and talked, completely unaware of what had just happened beneath their feet. Victoria smoothed her dress. She checked her reflection in a nearby mirror. She practiced her smile one more time. Then she walked back into the party to find her husband. There you are, Marcus said when he spotted her. I was looking for you. Have you seen Mom? I wanted to introduce her to Senator Morrison. Victoria's smile didn't waver. She wasn't feeling well. The stress of the evening, I think. She decided to go home. She left without saying goodbye. She didn't want to make a fuss. She said to tell you she loves you and she'll call tomorrow. Marcus's brow furrowed. That doesn't sound like her. She was embarrassed about the vase. I think she just needed some space. He still looked uncertain, but Victoria slipped her arm through his and guided him toward the senator. Come on, we have guests to attend to. Below them in the cold darkness of the basement, Eleanor pressed her face against the steel bars and wept. She could hear the muffled sounds of the party above her. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it carrying on as though she didn't exist. Her knees ached from kneeling on concrete. Her wrists were bruised from where Victoria had grabbed her. Her heart was breaking with a pain far worse than any physical wound. She thought about Marcus, her beautiful boy, the baby she had held in her arms 35 years ago, the child she had raised with all the love she possessed, the man who was somewhere above her right now, completely unaware that his mother was trapped in a cage. Marcus, she whispered into the darkness. Please, please find me. But the music was too loud. The party was too bright. And Victoria's lies were too convincing. No one heard her. No one came. Eleanor curled into herself in the cramped space, trying to conserve warmth, trying to hold on to hope. She had survived difficult things before. She had buried a husband. She had raised a child alone. She had faced cancer and won. She could survive this too. She had to. Because somewhere above her, Victoria Harper was dancing with her son, laughing at clever jokes, accepting compliments on her perfect party. And Eleanor knew, with the certainty that comes only from 6 decades of living, that the truth always finds a way to surface. She just had to stay alive long enough to see it happen. 9:15 p.m. Victoria accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took a long sip. Her hand was steady now. Her smile was back in place. The trembling had stopped somewhere between the basement door and the living room, replaced by a cold numbness that felt almost like calm. She had done it. The worst was over. Now she just had to survive the next few hours. Mrs. Harper. The event coordinator appeared at her elbow, clipboard in hand. The photographer wants to know if you're ready for the group photo with the mayor. Give me 5 minutes. Of course. Victoria scanned the room, searching for Marcus. She found him near the bar, deep in conversation with Senator Morrison and 2 men she didn't recognize. He was laughing at something, his posture relaxed. his attention fully engaged. He hadn't noticed anything wrong. He believed her story about Eleanor going home. The relief was intoxicating. Victoria made her way toward him, weaving through clusters of guests who smiled and nodded as she passed. She caught fragments of conversation as she walked. Absolutely stunning party. Victoria has such impeccable taste. Marcus really married well. Each compliment was a small victory. Each admiring glance was validation. This was what she had worked for. This was what she deserved. She reached Marcus and slipped her hand into his. "The photographer needs us for the group photo." "Already." He checked his watch. "I was just telling Senator Morrison about our foundation plans." "It'll only take a few minutes." Marcus excused himself and followed Victoria toward the main hall where the photographer had set up. As they walked, he leaned close to her ear. "I tried calling Mom. She's not answering." Victoria's heart stuttered, but her face remained composed. "She's probably asleep by now. You know how early she goes to bed. I'm worried about her. She seemed fine earlier." "She was embarrassed about the vase. You saw how upset she was." "That's exactly why I'm worried. I should have gone after her." "Marcus." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Your mother is a grown woman. She made a choice to leave because she wasn't feeling well. Chasing after her would have embarrassed her more. I just don't understand why she didn't say goodbye. She didn't want to interrupt your conversations. She knows how important tonight is." Marcus still looked troubled, but the photographer was waving them over, and there was no time for further discussion. "We'll call her in this morning," Victoria said firmly. "I promise she's fine." She wasn't fine. At that exact moment, Eleanor was pressing her back against the cold steel bars of the cage, trying to find a position that didn't make her joints scream with pain. 9:32 p.m. The basement was completely dark. Eleanor couldn't see her own hands in front of her face. The only sounds were the muffled bass of music from above, and her own ragged breathing. She had tried screaming. For the first 20 minutes, she had screamed until her throat was raw. No one heard. The music was too loud, the party too chaotic. Her voice simply disappeared into the concrete walls. Now, she was trying to conserve her energy, trying to think clearly, trying to find a way out. The cage was solid. She had tested every bar, every joint, every corner. The lock was sturdy brass, the kind that needed a key to open. There was no way to force it. Her only hope was Marcus. He would notice she was gone. He would come looking. He would find her. But the minutes kept passing, and no one came. Eleanor closed her eyes and thought about her son. She remembered the day he was born, how tiny he was, how he had gripped her finger with surprising strength. She remembered his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. She remembered holding him after his father's funeral, both of them crying until they had nothing left. She had raised him alone for 15 years. She had sacrificed everything for him. She had given him all the love she possessed. And now she was trapped in a cage while a monster danced with him upstairs. "I should have told him," she whispered to the darkness. "I should have warned him about her." But she hadn't. She had tried to give Victoria the benefit of the doubt. She had tried to believe that love could soften even the hardest hearts. She had been wrong. A sudden cramp seized her left leg. Eleanor gasped, trying to stretch in the confined space, but there was no room to move. The pain was excruciating. "Help," she whimpered. "Please, someone help me." No one answered. 9:47 p.m. The group photo was a success. Victoria stood in the center, flanked by the mayor and several prominent guests. Her smile radiant for the camera. She looked every inch the perfect hostess. Afterward, she excused herself to use the restroom. She needed a moment alone. A moment to breathe. A moment to convince herself that everything was under control. In the bathroom, she locked the door and stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked composed, elegant, successful. No one would ever guess what she had done. "You're fine," she told herself. "Everything is fine. A few more hours and this will all be over." But her hands had started shaking again. She gripped the edge of the sink until the trembling stopped. She couldn't fall apart now, not when she was so close. A knock on the door made her jump. "Mrs. Harper." It was one of the housekeepers, Maria. "Is everything all right?" "Fine. I'll be out in a minute." "There's a small issue in the kitchen. The head chef wants to speak with you about the dessert course." Victoria splashed cold water on her face, careful not to ruin her makeup. She took one more deep breath, then opened the door. Maria was waiting, her expression nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am." "It's fine. What does the chef need?" "He said something about a timing issue with the soufflés." Victoria followed Maria toward the kitchen, her mind already shifting to crisis management mode. The soufflés were supposed to be the highlight of the dessert course. If something went wrong with them, guests would notice. But as they passed the hallway leading to the basement, Maria slowed. "Ma'am." "What?" "I thought I heard something earlier. From down there." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Down where?" "The basement. It sounded like someone calling out." "You must have imagined it." "I don't think so. It sounded like—" "Maria." Victoria's voice sharpened. "I said you imagined it. The AC system in this house makes strange noises. Old ductwork. Now please show me to the kitchen." Maria hesitated for just a moment, her eyes flickering to the basement door. Then she nodded. "Yes, ma'am. This way." They continued toward the kitchen, but Victoria's heart was racing. If Maria had heard something, others might have too. She needed to increase the music volume. She needed to keep people away from this hallway. She needed to make sure Eleanor stayed quiet. 10:05 p.m. The kitchen crisis was resolved quickly. The chef had simply needed approval to delay the soufflé course by 15 minutes to ensure perfection. Victoria granted it without argument and returned to the party. But she couldn't shake Maria's words. "I thought I heard something." Victoria found the event coordinator and pulled her aside. "I need the music louder." "Louder? It's already quite louder. Tell the DJ to increase the volume by at least 20%. Some of the older guests have been commenting that it's too loud already." "I don't care. Turn it up." The coordinator stared at her for a moment, clearly confused by the intensity in Victoria's voice. But she nodded and headed toward the DJ booth. Victoria watched the volume increase, feeling a small measure of relief as the bass vibrated through the floor. That should drown out any sounds from below. She was about to return to mingling when she spotted Marcus standing near the hallway that led to the basement. Her stomach dropped. She crossed the room as quickly as she could without drawing attention. "What are you doing over here?" Marcus turned to look at her. "I thought I heard something." "Heard what?" "I don't know, like a voice, coming from somewhere below us." Victoria forced a laugh. "Darling, you're imagining things. It's just the old pipes. This house has terrible acoustics." "It sounded like someone calling my name." "The DJ is playing that song. What's it called, the one that sounds like someone saying Marcus over and over?" Marcus frowned. "I don't think that's a real song." "Of course it is. I heard it at the Hendersons' party last month." Victoria took his arm and steered him away from the hallway. "Come on, the mayor wants to talk to you about the city council fundraiser." Marcus allowed himself to be guided away, but he kept glancing back over his shoulder. Victoria noticed and squeezed his arm tighter. "Focus, darling. We have important people to impress." "Right, you're right." He shook his head as if clearing it. "I must be more tired than I thought." They rejoined the party, but Victoria couldn't relax. Marcus had heard something. Maria had heard something. How many others had noticed without saying anything? She needed this party to end. She needed everyone to leave so she could figure out her next move. But it was only 10 o'clock. The night was far from over. 10:23 p.m. Eleanor had stopped trying to call for help. Her voice was gone, reduced to a painful rasp that barely carried beyond the cage walls. The cramps in her legs had spread to her back. Her arthritis was flaring, sending jolts of pain through her joints with every tiny movement. The cold had seeped into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably. But worse than the physical pain was the fear. What if Victoria didn't let her out? What if this wasn't just for the party? What if her daughter-in-law had snapped completely? Eleanor thought about all the warning signs she had ignored. The way Victoria flinched whenever Marcus showed his mother affection. The forced smiles, the subtle digs, the escalating tension over the past 3 years. She had sensed something dark in Victoria, but she had convinced herself she was being paranoid. She had wanted so badly to believe that her son had married a good woman. Now she was paying the price for her optimism. A sound from above made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone was walking in the hallway near the basement door. "Help!" Eleanor tried to scream, but her voice came out as a broken whisper. "Please, someone!" The footsteps paused. For one heart-stopping moment, Eleanor thought someone had heard her. Then the footsteps continued growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Eleanor slumped against the bars, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus," she sobbed quietly. "Where are you?" 10:41 p.m. Marcus was standing by the bar when his phone buzzed. A text from his cousin Jennifer. "Hey, is Aunt Eleanor with you? Tried calling her to wish her happy birthday next week, but she's not answering." Marcus frowned and typed back. "She went home early, not feeling well. That's not like her. Is everything okay? I don't know." Victoria said she was embarrassed about breaking some vase. There was a long pause before Jennifer's next message arrived. "Marcus, can I be honest about something?" "Of course. I've always had a weird feeling about Victoria, the way she looks at Aunt Eleanor sometimes. It's hard to explain, but it doesn't seem right." Marcus stared at the message, his stomach tightening. He typed back, "What do you mean? Just be careful, okay? And check on your mom tonight, please." Before he could respond, Victoria appeared at his side. "Who are you texting?" "Jennifer. She was asking about Mom." "That's sweet of her." Victoria plucked the phone from his hand with a playful smile. "No phones at our own party, remember? We agreed." "Vicky, I'm worried about my mother. And I keep telling you she's fine. She's probably asleep by now." Victoria tucked the phone into her clutch. "You can call her first thing tomorrow. Now come dance with me. They're playing our song." Marcus allowed himself to be led to the dance floor, but his mind was elsewhere. Jennifer's words echoed in his head. The way she looks at Aunt Eleanor. It doesn't seem right. He thought about all the times Victoria had tensed up when Eleanor entered a room. All the times she had cut his mother off mid-sentence. All the times she had found excuses to exclude Eleanor from family events. He had always attributed it to normal mother-in-law, daughter-in-law tension. "Was it something more, you're not paying attention?" Victoria said, bringing him back to the present. "Sorry, I was thinking." "About your mother again?" "Yes." Victoria's expression flickered with something Marcus couldn't identify. "She's fine, Marcus, I promise. Can you please just enjoy tonight for me?" He looked into his wife's eyes, searching for reassurance. What he found instead made him uneasy. Her smile was too wide. Her gaze was too intense. She looked like a woman on the edge of something. "Okay," he said quietly. "For you." They continued dancing, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. 11:08 p.m. The party was finally starting to wind down. Several older guests had already departed, and the remaining crowd had thinned considerably. Victoria stood near the entrance, saying goodbye to the Hendersons with effusive thanks. "Such a wonderful evening," Mrs. Henderson said, kissing Victoria's cheek. "You must share your event planner's contact information." "Absolutely. I'll send it tomorrow. Give our regards to Eleanor when you see her. I was sorry she had to leave early." Victoria's smile didn't waver. "I'll tell her. She'll be touched." The Hendersons departed, and Victoria allowed herself a small exhale of relief. The night was almost over. Just a few more guests to see out, and then she could figure out what to do about Eleanor. But as she turned back toward the party, she nearly collided with Maria. "Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry, but I need to speak with you. Not now, Maria. It's important. Something in the housekeeper's voice made Victoria pause. What is it? I went to the basement to get more champagne from the storage room. Victoria's heart stopped. And the door was locked from the outside, and I heard something down there. Someone crying. Victoria's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. You misheard. No, ma'am. I'm certain. Someone is down there. That's impossible. Mrs. Harper, I think we should check. Maria. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You need to forget what you think you heard. Do you understand? But I said, do you understand? Maria's eyes widened. She took a step back, fear flickering across her face. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Good. Now go help with the cleanup. And do not mention this to anyone. Not to my husband. Not to the other staff. Not to anyone. Maria nodded once, then hurried away. Victoria watched her go, her mind racing. This was spiraling out of control. Too many people had heard things. Too many questions were being asked. She needed to end this party. Now. 11:29 p.m. The last guests finally departed at 11:30. Victoria stood in the emptying foyer accepting compliments and promises to reciprocate the hospitality. Spectacular evening, the mayor said, shaking her hand. My wife and I are already looking forward to next year. Thank you so much for coming. When the door finally closed behind him, Victoria leaned against it and let out a long breath. The house was quiet, except for the sounds of the cleaning crew gathering glasses and folding linens. Marcus appeared beside her. That was incredible. You should be proud. Thank you. Everyone was talking about how perfect everything was. The food, the decorations, the music. You pulled it off, Vicky. She should have felt triumphant. This was exactly what she had wanted. Instead, she felt hollow. I'm exhausted, she said. I think I'll go to bed. Don't you want to check on Mom first? It's been hours since she left. Victoria's throat tightened. She's probably asleep. I know, but I'd feel better if I heard her voice. Just a quick call. Marcus, it's almost midnight. Calling her now will only worry her. One quick call, just to make sure she got home okay. Victoria saw the determination in his eyes. There was no talking him out of this. Fine, but make it quick. Marcus pulled out his phone retrieved from Victoria's clutch earlier and dialed his mother's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. Victoria held her breath. Voicemail. Hey Mom, it's me. Just wanted to make sure you got home okay. Call me when you wake up. Love you. He hung up and frowned. That's the 5th time tonight she hasn't answered. She's sleeping. Mom always answers when I call, even at midnight. Maybe her phone is on silent. She never puts it on silent. Marcus stared at his phone, a muscle working in his jaw. Victoria could see the wheels turning in his mind, putting pieces together that shouldn't connect. I'm going to drive to her house, he said suddenly. What, Marcus? That's ridiculous. Something's wrong. I can feel it. Nothing's wrong. You're being paranoid. Then why did she leave without saying goodbye? Why hasn't she answered a single call? Why did 3 different people tell me tonight that they heard strange sounds coming from the basement? Victoria's blood ran cold. What people? Maria said something. And Senator Morrison mentioned hearing what sounded like crying. And one of the caterers asked if we had a pet locked up downstairs. They're all imagining things. The house makes strange noises. Then you won't mind if I check the basement. The words hung between them like a guillotine. Victoria's mind raced. There's nothing in the basement. Then it'll only take a minute to prove me wrong. Marcus, this is insane. You're exhausted. We both are. Let's just go to bed and... Show me the basement, Victoria. She had never heard that tone from him before. Cold, demanding, suspicious. I don't have the key, she lied. You don't need a key. The basement door doesn't have a lock. I installed one last week for security. Security for the basement. There's expensive wine down there. I didn't want the staff helping themselves. Marcus stared at her. His eyes searched her face looking for something. Truth, perhaps, or evidence of a lie. Where's the key? I don't know. I must have misplaced it. Victoria. What? You're lying to me. The accusation hit her like a physical blow. How dare you? I can always tell when you're lying. Your left eye twitches. It's twitching right now. Victoria's hand flew to her face involuntarily. Marcus's expression hardened. What did you do? Nothing. What did you do to my mother? I didn't do anything. Then why won't you let me check the basement? Why are you so desperate to keep me away from that door? Victoria's composure cracked. Tears sprang to her eyes. You never trust me. You always take her side. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, you always choose her over me. This isn't about choosing sides. This is about my mother who disappeared tonight, who hasn't answered her phone while strange sounds have been coming from our basement. Where is she, Victoria? I told you, she went home. Then call her, right now. Call her and prove me wrong. I don't have to prove anything to you. Yes, you do. Call her. Now. Victoria's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. She dialed Eleanor's number, knowing exactly where the phone would ring. In the basement. In Eleanor's purse. Next to the cage. The phone went to voicemail after 4 rings. See? Victoria said weakly. She's not answering. That doesn't prove she's at home. It doesn't prove she's not. Marcus's face twisted with frustration. He spun away from her and strode toward the hallway. Victoria ran after him. Marcus, wait! He ignored her. His footsteps echoed against the marble as he headed toward the basement door. Victoria grabbed his arm. Please, don't. He turned to look at her. In that moment, she saw something die in his eyes. Some final shred of trust, of love, of belief in who she was supposed to be. Let go of me, he said quietly. Marcus. Let go. She released his arm. He continued toward the basement door. 11:47 p.m. Marcus reached the door and tried the handle, locked just as Victoria had said. He pressed his ear against the wood. At first he heard nothing, just silence, just the settling of an old house. Then, faintly, impossibly, he heard it. A voice. Weak. Broken. Calling his name. Mom. He slammed his fist against the door. Mom, the voice grew slightly louder. Marcus, I'm down here. The world tilted sideways. For a moment Marcus thought he might pass out. His mother was in the basement, locked in, for hours, while he danced and laughed and celebrated his wife's party. He spun around. Victoria stood frozen at the end of the hallway, her face a mask of terror. Give me the key. Marcus, I can explain. Give me the key. His roar echoed through the empty house. The remaining cleaning staff froze, staring in horror. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small brass key and held it toward him. Marcus snatched it from her grasp. He fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key in the hole. Finally, it clicked. He yanked the door open and took the stairs 2 at a time. In the darkness below, he could hear his mother crying. I'm coming, Mom. I'm coming. He hit the light switch at the bottom of the stairs. The fluorescent bulb flickered to life, revealing the horror that waited for him. His mother. In a dog cage, curled on her side, shivering, her face wet with tears, her dress stained with dirt, and worse. Marcus fell to his knees beside the cage. Oh God, no. Marcus. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. You found me. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. I'm going to get you out. He found the padlock on the cage door and tried the key Victoria had given him. It didn't fit. Victoria! He screamed up the stairs. "Where's the key to the cage?" No response. He screamed louder. "Victoria, the key now!" Footsteps on the stairs. Victoria appeared, her face streaked with tears. "I don't have it. I lost it." "You're lying." "I'm not. I swear. The lock. I found it in the garage. I don't know where the key is." Marcus looked around desperately. His eyes landed on a toolbox in the corner. He lunged for it, grabbed a crowbar, and attacked the cage door. Metal screeched against metal. The padlock held. He swung again harder, fueled by rage and horror and guilt. On the third swing, the lock shattered. Marcus ripped the cage door open and gathered his mother in his arms. She was ice cold. She was trembling. She was alive. "I've got you," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I've got you, Mom. You're safe now." Eleanor clung to him with what little strength she had left. "I knew you'd come," she breathed. "I knew you'd find me." Marcus carried her toward the stairs past Victoria, who stood frozen like a statue of shame. "Call 911, he said without looking at his wife. "Now." Victoria didn't move. Marcus finally met her eyes. What he saw there, guilt, fear, something that might have been regret, meant nothing to him anymore. "If you don't call them right now," he said quietly, "I will kill you." Victoria's hand shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed. 11:58 p.m. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics found Eleanor suffering from severe hypothermia dehydration and the early stages of shock. They loaded her onto a stretcher while firing questions at Marcus. "How long was she down there?" "I don't know. Hours. Since around 8. "Does she have any medical conditions?" "Arthritis. She had cancer 5 years ago, but she's been in remission." "We need to get her to the hospital now. Her body temperature is dangerously low." Marcus climbed into the ambulance beside his mother, gripping her hand like a lifeline. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Victoria standing in the driveway watching the ambulance pull away. She looked small, broken, alone. He felt nothing. The ambulance screamed into the night, carrying Eleanor toward safety, carrying Marcus toward a truth he didn't yet fully understand. And in the empty mansion behind them, Victoria Harper stood perfectly still as the first police car pulled into her driveway. Her perfect night was over. Her perfect life was about to end. 12:03 a.m. The police officer's flashlight swept across Victoria's face, forcing her to squint against the glare. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Davis. We received a call about an emergency at this address." "There's been a misunderstanding." "Is that so?" The 911 call mentioned an elderly woman found locked in a cage. Victoria's throat closed. She couldn't speak. She couldn't think. Everything was collapsing around her like a house built on sand. "Ma'am, I need you to answer my question. Was someone confined against their will in this residence tonight?" I need to call my lawyer." "That's your right. But first, I need you to confirm whether a crime was committed here." Victoria's legs gave out. She sank onto the front steps, her designer gown pooling around her like a bloodstain. The officer called for backup while his partner began securing the scene. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, then a detective's sedan, then a crime scene unit van. Victoria watched it all unfold with the detached horror of someone watching their own execution. 12:17 a.m. At Greenwich Hospital, Marcus burst through the emergency room doors, still carrying traces of his mother's tears on his shirt. "Eleanor Harper. She was just brought in by ambulance. Where is she?" The nurse behind the desk typed quickly into her computer. "Are you family?" "I'm her son." "She's being evaluated now. Please have a seat in the waiting area. A doctor will be with you shortly." "I need to see her." "Sir, I understand, but the medical team needs to assess her condition first. Please." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to push past the nurse and find his mother himself. But he recognized the futility. He forced himself to sit in a plastic chair that felt like punishment. The waiting room was nearly empty at this hour. A man in the corner cradled a bandaged hand. A young woman paced near the vending machines, talking rapidly into her phone. The fluorescent lights hummed with indifferent monotony. Marcus stared at his hands. The same hands that had carried his mother out of that cage. The same hands that had danced with Victoria just hours ago. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Did you check on Aunt Eleanor? Is she okay?" Marcus typed back with trembling fingers. "She's in the hospital. Victoria locked her in a cage." The response came immediately. "What? Then I'm coming. Don't move." Marcus set down his phone and buried his face in his hands. The tears came then hot and relentless, soaking through his fingers as his body shook with silent sobs. How could he have been so blind? How could he have married a monster and never seen it? How could he have danced at a party while his mother suffered in the darkness below? The guilt was suffocating. 12:34 a.m. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at the Harper mansion with 15 years of experience and a stomach that rarely turned anymore. Tonight was different. She stood in the basement staring at the dog cage with its broken lock and the small puddle of urine on the concrete floor. Evidence markers dotted the space like accusatory fingers. The victim is 68 years old. Officer Davis briefed her. She was down here for approximately 4 hours before the husband found her. Where's the wife now? In the living room with my partner. She's asked for a lawyer. Of course she has. Mitchell climbed the stairs and made her way to the living room. Victoria sat on a velvet couch that probably cost more than Mitchell's car. Her red gown was wrinkled now, her makeup smeared her hair escaping from its careful updo. She looked like a fallen queen. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Detective Mitchell. I'd like to ask you some questions." "I told the officer I want a lawyer." "That's your right. But while we wait for your lawyer, perhaps you'd like to tell me your version of events." "I have nothing to say." "Really?" "Because right now the evidence is telling a very ugly story. An elderly woman with health problems locked in a dog cage for hours while you hosted a party. That's false imprisonment at minimum. Possibly attempted murder if the DA wants to push it." Victoria's face went white. "I wasn't trying to kill her." "Then what were you trying to do?" I just wanted her out of the way. Just for a few hours. Just until the party was over." "Why?" "Because she was going to ruin everything." Mitchell sat down across from Victoria, her voice softening slightly. "Ruin what?" "My life. My marriage. Everything I've worked for." Victoria's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She found out about the debt. She was going to tell Marcus. She was going to make him see that I'm not what he thinks I am. What debt? Credit card debt. $50,000. I've been hiding it for over a year. And you thought locking your mother-in-law in a cage would solve that problem. I wasn't thinking, I panicked. She broke the vase and Marcus took her side like he always does, and I snapped. Mitchell studied the woman in front of her. She had seen this before. The desperate need to maintain an image, the fear of being exposed, the belief that controlling others could somehow control one's own chaos. But she had never seen it manifest quite like this. "Mrs. Harper, I'm going to read you your rights now." Victoria's head snapped up. "You're arresting me." "Yes, ma'am. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." The words washed over Victoria like cold water. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to have her perfect night, her perfect life, her perfect everything. Instead, she was being handcuffed in her own living room while her party decorations wilted around her. 1:02 a.m. The doctor found Marcus still sitting in the same plastic chair staring at nothing. "Mr. Harper." Marcus jerked to attention. How is she? How's my mother? She's stable. We've treated her for hypothermia and dehydration. Her core temperature dropped dangerously low, but we've been able to bring it back up gradually. She's also showing signs of mild shock and significant bruising on her wrists and knees. Can I see her? Yes, but I need to warn you. She's been through a severe trauma. Physically, she'll recover, but emotionally, she may need time. Marcus nodded numbly. Which room? Room 312, third floor. He was moving before the doctor finished speaking, taking the stairs because the elevator was too slow. Third floor, room 312. His mother. He found her lying in a hospital bed, looking smaller than he had ever seen her. An IV dripped steadily into her arm. A heart monitor beeped with reassuring regularity. Her eyes were closed, but they opened when she heard him enter. Marcus! He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hand in both of his. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. I knew you'd come. Her voice was weak but steady. I kept telling myself, Marcus will find me. Marcus will come. I should have found you sooner. I should have known something was wrong. How could you have known she lied to you? I should have seen through the lies. Eleanor squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. Don't do that to yourself. Don't carry guilt that belongs to someone else. Marcus bowed his head, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. How could she do this to you? How could anyone do this? Pain makes people do terrible things, sweetheart. Victoria has been hurting for a long time. I could see it in her eyes even when she smiled. You're defending her after what she did. I'm not defending her. I'm trying to understand. There's a difference. Marcus looked up at his mother, marveling at her capacity for grace, even in the aftermath of horror. I don't think I can be as forgiving as you. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you not to let hatred consume you. She locked you in a cage, Mom, like an animal. I know what she did. I lived it. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. But I also know that becoming bitter won't heal me. It won't heal you. It won't fix what's broken. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't trust himself to speak. The door opened behind him. Jennifer rushed in her coat, still half-buttoned, her face streaked with panic. Aunt Eleanor, oh my God, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little worse for wear. Jennifer hurried to the other side of the bed and took Eleanor's free hand. I can't believe this happened. I can't believe she would. Marcus, where is Victoria now? Being arrested, I hope. Good. I always knew there was something wrong with her. I tried to tell you. Jennifer. Eleanor's voice carried a gentle warning. Not now. But, Aunt Eleanor. Not now. Jennifer fell silent, chastened. The room settled into an uneasy quiet, broken only by the steady beeping of machines. Marcus stared at his mother's face, memorizing every line, every wrinkle, every sign of the ordeal she had survived. He had almost lost her tonight, because of a woman he had chosen, because of a marriage he had believed in. He would never make that mistake again. 1:38 a.m. Victoria sat in an interrogation room at the Greenwich police station. Her lawyer finally arrived and seated beside her. Thomas Whitfield was expensive, aggressive, and completely out of his depth with this kind of case. My client will not be making any further statements tonight, Whitfield announced. Detective Mitchell nodded. That's fine. We have more than enough to hold her. The victim's testimony alone is damning, not to mention the physical evidence. What physical evidence? The cage, the padlock, urine on the basement floor, bruising on the victim's wrists consistent with being forcibly grabbed. Your client's own admission to multiple officers that she locked Mrs. Harper in the basement. Whitfield's face tightened. Those statements were made without counsel present. She was read her rights and chose to speak anyway. It's all on body cam. Victoria sat silently through the exchange, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. The numbness had settled in fully now. She felt like she was watching everything from outside her own body. "What happens now?" Whitfield asked. "Your client will be processed and held overnight. Arraignment tomorrow morning. Given the severity of the charges and the victim's age, I expect the DA will push for significant bail." "What charges exactly?" "False imprisonment, elder abuse, reckless endangerment, possibly assault depending on how the bruising is classified." Mitchell paused. "And if Mrs. Harper's condition worsens, we might be looking at attempted murder." Victoria's head snapped up. "I didn't try to kill her." "You locked a 68-year-old woman with health problems in a cold basement for 4 hours without food, water, or access to her medication. If she had died—" "But she didn't die." "No thanks to you." "Detective." Whitfield held up a hand. "My client has invoked her right to remain silent. This interview is over." Mitchell stood. "Fine. But Mrs. Harper, just so you know, your husband has already given a full statement. So have 3 members of your household staff who heard sounds from the basement and were told to ignore them. And your mother-in-law is awake and talking. This isn't a case you're going to lawyer your way out of." She left the room, leaving Victoria alone with her attorney and the crushing weight of what she had done. "Tell me everything," Whitfield said once the door closed. "And I mean everything." Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she finally whispered. "I just wanted to be good enough." 2:15 a.m. Marcus sat in the hospital cafeteria nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Jennifer had finally gone home after he promised to call with any updates. Eleanor was sleeping peacefully, the nurse assured him, and would likely remain asleep until morning. He should have gone home too. But home meant the mansion. Home meant the basement. Home meant reminders of Victoria everywhere he looked. He couldn't face that. Not yet. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Harper, this is Detective Sarah Mitchell. We spoke briefly at your residence earlier." "Have you arrested her?" "Yes, sir. She's being held at the station pending arraignment tomorrow morning." "Good. I need you to come in tomorrow afternoon to give a formal statement. Can you manage that?" "I'll be there." "One more thing, Mr. Harper. During our investigation, we discovered some financial irregularities. Your wife mentioned significant credit card debt that she'd been hiding from you." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "How much?" "Approximately $50,000. The number hit him like a punch. 50,000. How is that possible? According to her, she's been hiding it for over a year, using balance transfers, opening new cards, accumulating interest. The debt is in both your names." Marcus closed his eyes. The betrayal kept multiplying. Every time he thought he had grasped the full extent of Victoria's deception, another layer revealed itself. "Thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry to add to your burden tonight, but I thought you should be aware before you speak with attorneys tomorrow." "Attorneys, right." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I'm going to need a divorce lawyer too, aren't I?" "That's not for me to say, sir, but given the circumstances—" "Given the circumstances, my marriage is over, my finances are destroyed, and my mother almost died in my own basement." Mitchell was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than before. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Mr. Harper. I've seen people at their absolute worst, but I've also seen them come back from things that seemed impossible to survive. This is devastating. It will take time to process. But you're not alone. Your mother is alive. Your family is rallying around you. That counts for something." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He stared at the cold coffee in front of him, watching the overhead light reflect on its surface. "Thank you, Detective. I'll see you tomorrow." He hung up and sat in silence alone, with the wreckage of everything he had believed. 3:47 a.m. Victoria lay on a thin mattress in a holding cell, still wearing her crumpled red gown. They had taken her jewelry, her clutch, her dignity. All she had left were the walls pressing in around her and the thoughts that wouldn't stop screaming. She had ruined everything. The realization crashed over her again and again like waves against rock. Her marriage was over. Her reputation was destroyed. Her freedom was gone. Everything she had spent her entire life chasing had evaporated in a single night. And for what? Because she was afraid. Because she was insecure. Because she couldn't stand the thought of Eleanor exposing her failures. Victoria curled onto her side, pulling her knees to her chest. The thin blanket did nothing to stop her shivering. She thought about her father, the mechanic with grease-stained hands who had worked double shifts to keep food on the table. She thought about her mother who had died when Victoria was 12, leaving behind a daughter who never felt like enough. She thought about the years of clawing her way up, of reinventing herself, of becoming someone new, someone better, someone worthy of love. All of it was a lie. All of it was a performance. And now the curtain had come down, revealing the scared little girl who had been hiding underneath all along. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. The darkness didn't answer. 6:22 a.m. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the hospital window and her son slumped in a chair beside her bed. "Marcus." She reached out to touch his arm. "Have you been here all night?" He jerked awake, disoriented for a moment before his eyes focused on her face. "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Better, stronger." She tried to sit up and winced. "Maybe not that much stronger." Marcus helped her adjust the bed to a more comfortable position. "The doctor said you can probably go home tomorrow if your vitals stay stable." "Home?" Eleanor considered the word. "I'm not sure I can go back to that house." "You won't have to. I'm going to find you a hotel room until we figure out something more permanent." "What about you?" Marcus looked away. "I don't know yet." Eleanor studied her son's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the grief etched into every line. What happened to Victoria? She was arrested. Arraignment is this morning. Are you going? No. I never want to see her again. Marcus. Don't, Mom. Don't ask me to forgive her. Don't ask me to understand. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Eleanor reached out and took his hand. I wasn't going to ask you that. Then what? I was going to ask if you've eaten anything in the past 12 hours. Despite everything, Marcus felt a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. No. Then go to the cafeteria and get yourself some breakfast. I'll be fine for 20 minutes. I don't want to leave you alone. I'm in a hospital full of nurses and doctors. I'm not alone. She squeezed his hand. You need to take care of yourself too, sweetheart. You can't pour from an empty cup. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Now go eat something. He left reluctantly, glancing back twice before disappearing through the door. Eleanor settled against her pillows and closed her eyes. The pain in her body was manageable now, dulled by medication and rest. But the pain in her heart would take longer to heal. She didn't hate Victoria. That surprised her. After everything that had happened, she expected to feel rage, vengeance, a burning desire to see her daughter-in-law punished. Instead, she felt something closer to pity. Victoria was a broken woman. Eleanor had seen it from the beginning, though she hadn't understood the full extent. The desperate need for approval. The terror of inadequacy. The belief that love had to be earned, that acceptance had to be performed, that worthiness was something you could achieve if you just tried hard enough. Eleanor had tried to reach her. She had tried to show her that real love didn't require perfection. But Victoria had been too afraid to believe it. And now they were both paying the price. 9:00 a.m. The arraignment was brief and brutal. Victoria stood before Judge Harrison in her wrinkled gown, her wrists cuffed, her face pale and hollow. The prosecutor laid out the charges with clinical precision. false imprisonment of an elderly person, elder abuse, reckless endangerment. How does the defendant plead? Whitfield spoke for her. Not guilty, Your Honor. The prosecutor pushed back. Your Honor, the defendant has already admitted to multiple officers that she locked her mother-in-law in a cage. We have physical evidence, witness testimony, and a victim who nearly died of hypothermia. We request that bail be denied. The defendant has no prior criminal record, Whitfield countered. She has deep roots in this community and poses no flight risk. We request reasonable bail with conditions. Judge Harrison considered for a long moment. Given the severity of the charges and the vulnerability of the victim, I'm setting bail at $500,000. The defendant will surrender her passport, submit to electronic monitoring, and have no contact with the victim or any member of the victim's immediate family. The gavel came down. Victoria was led away to be processed. As she shuffled toward the side door, she caught a glimpse of movement in the gallery. Not Marcus, he hadn't come. But his cousin Jennifer was there watching with undisguised contempt. Their eyes met for just a moment. Jennifer mouthed two words, "Rot in hell." Victoria looked away and kept walking. 10:45 a.m. Marcus arrived at the police station to give his statement, feeling like a man walking through a nightmare that wouldn't end. Detective Mitchell met him in the lobby and led him to a small interview room. "Can I get you anything, coffee, water?" "Just let me get this over with." She nodded and turned on the recording device. For the record, this is Detective Sarah Mitchell interviewing Marcus Harper regarding the events of October 15th. Mr. Harper, please describe what happened last night in your own words. Marcus took a breath and began. He told her about the party, about Victoria's strange behavior, about the multiple people who mentioned hearing sounds from the basement, about his growing suspicion that something was wrong. He told her about finding the locked door, about hearing his mother's voice, about breaking open the cage and carrying her out. He told her about the moment he realized his wife was capable of something so monstrous. "Did you have any indication before last night that your wife might behave this way toward your mother?" Marcus hesitated. "There was always tension between them. I thought it was normal. Mother-in-law, daughter-in-law stuff. But looking back, there were signs. The way Victoria would get quiet whenever my mom was around. The way she would change the subject if I talked about my childhood. The way she flinched whenever I mentioned calling my mother." Marcus's voice cracked. "I saw it all, but I didn't want to see what it meant." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Did your wife ever express any specific grievances about your mother?" "She said my mom made her feel inadequate, like she wasn't good enough, like she would never measure up." "Did your mother ever do anything to make her feel that way?" "No. My mom tried everything to make Victoria feel welcome. She was kind to her. She included her in family events. She went out of her way to compliment her and support her." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "And Victoria repaid her by locking her in a cage." The interview continued for another hour. Marcus answered every question as thoroughly as he could, even when the answers made him want to scream. When it was finally over, Mitchell walked him to the door. "Mr. Harper, I know this isn't easy, but your testimony is crucial to this case. Thank you for your cooperation. Will she go to prison?" "That depends on a lot of factors, the charges, the evidence, the jury. But I can tell you that cases involving elder abuse are taken very seriously. The DA will push for significant time." Marcus nodded slowly. "Good." He walked out of the police station into the bright October sunshine. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but everything had changed. His mother was in the hospital. His wife was in jail. His marriage was a smoking ruin, and somehow he had to figure out how to keep going. 12:30 p.m. Victoria made bail by early afternoon. Her father had wired the money without asking questions, just as he had done 100 times before when his daughter needed rescuing. She stood outside the police station, an ankle monitor strapped beneath her jeans, waiting for the taxi that would take her to... where? She couldn't go home. The restraining order prevented any contact with Marcus. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Car service will pick you up, taking you to a hotel. We'll talk tomorrow. No, I love you. No, how are you? Just logistics." Victoria couldn't blame him. She couldn't blame anyone but herself. The car arrived and she climbed in, giving the driver the address of a hotel downtown. As Greenwich blurred past the window, she thought about everything she had lost. Her husband, her home, her reputation, her freedom essentially given the ankle monitor, and the upcoming trial. But worst of all, she had lost herself. The woman who stared back at her from the car window was a stranger. A monster. Someone capable of locking an elderly woman in a cage because she was afraid of being exposed. Victoria had always told herself she was a survivor, a fighter, someone who did what needed to be done to protect herself. Now she saw the truth. She wasn't a survivor, she was a coward. She had spent her entire life running from her own inadequacy, and when she finally got cornered, she had destroyed everyone around her. The hotel room was generic and anonymous. Victoria sat on the bed and stared at the wall, feeling the weight of silence pressing down on her. She should call someone. Her father. Her lawyer. Someone who could tell her what to do next. Instead, she pulled out a notepad from the hotel desk and began to write. "Dear Marcus, I know you probably never want to hear from me again. I don't blame you. What I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand something even if you can't forgive it. I never hated your mother. I was terrified of her. Terrified of how easily she connected with people. Terrified of how much you loved her. Terrified that she could see through me in ways that you never could. I have spent my entire life performing, pretending to be someone worthy of love, pretending to be confident when I was drowning in fear, pretending to belong in a world that never wanted me. Your mother saw through the performance, and I couldn't handle that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm just asking you to know that the woman you married did love you in whatever broken way she was capable of. I'm sorry, Marcus, for everything. Victoria." She folded the letter and set it aside. She would never send it. Some words were meant only for the silence, but writing them made her feel for the first time in days like she might still be human. Somewhere across town, Eleanor was discharged from the hospital and driven to a hotel by her son. Somewhere across town, Marcus was meeting with a divorce attorney. Somewhere across town, the wheels of justice were grinding slowly toward a reckoning that would change all of their lives forever. And in a generic hotel room, Victoria Harper sat alone with the ruins of everything she had built, finally beginning to understand the cost of living behind a mask. 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed when Victoria Harper walked in, wearing a simple gray dress her lawyer had chosen. No jewelry, no designer labels, nothing that might remind the jury of her wealth or her ambition. She kept her eyes forward as she made her way to the defense table, refusing to look at the gallery behind her. She knew who was there. Marcus, Eleanor, Jennifer. Half of Greenwich, it seemed, all gathered to watch her downfall. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Chen presiding. Everyone stood. Victoria's legs trembled beneath her, but she forced herself to remain upright. Judge Chen took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with sharp, unreadable eyes. "Be seated. We are here for the matter of State of Connecticut versus Victoria Harper. Is the prosecution ready?" "Yes, Your Honor." Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres rose from his seat. He was young, hungry, and had made it clear in pre-trial motions that he intended to make an example of this case. "Is the defense ready?" Thomas Whitfield stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin with opening statements. Mr. Torres." Torres buttoned his jacket and approached the jury box with measured confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about cruelty. It's about a woman who on the night of October 15th locked her 68-year-old mother-in-law in a dog cage and left her there for nearly 4 hours while she hosted a party upstairs." Victoria kept her face neutral, but her heart was racing. The victim, Eleanor Harper, is a retired schoolteacher, A woman who spent 30 years shaping young minds. A woman who raised her son alone after her husband passed away. A woman who did nothing but try to welcome the defendant into her family. Torres paused, letting the words sink in. And how did the defendant repay that kindness? By grabbing her, shoving her into a steel cage meant for dogs, and leaving her in a cold, dark basement while 200 people celebrated overhead. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Victoria felt dozens of eyes boring into her back. The evidence will show that this was not an accident. It was not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated act of cruelty planned and executed by a woman who valued her social standing more than human decency. Torres returned to his seat. By the end of this trial, you will have no choice but to find the defendant guilty on all charges. 9:47 a.m. Whitfield approached the jury with a very different energy. Calm, understanding, almost apologetic. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened on October 15th was a tragedy. There's no denying that. Mrs. Eleanor Harper suffered, and nothing I say here today can undo that suffering. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I'm going to ask you to look beyond the headlines, beyond the shock value, beyond the easy narrative of good versus evil. Victoria watched him work the room, grateful for his skill, even as she doubted its effectiveness. Victoria Harper is not a monster. She's a woman who was drowning in debt, terrified of losing everything she had worked for, and pushed to her breaking point by circumstances most of us can barely imagine. Did she make a terrible choice? Yes. Did she cause harm? Absolutely. But was she acting with malicious intent to hurt or kill? The evidence will show that she was not. Whitfield turned to face Victoria directly. My client has taken full responsibility for her actions. She has expressed genuine remorse, and she is prepared to accept the consequences of what she did. But I am asking you to consider those consequences fairly in light of all the evidence, not just the parts that make for good headlines. He returned to the defense table. Thank you. Judge Chen nodded. Mr. Torres, call your first witness. 10:15 a.m. Eleanor Harper was helped to the witness stand by a court officer. She moved slowly, her body still recovering from the ordeal, but her eyes were clear and steady. Please state your name for the record. Eleanor Marie Harper. Mrs. Harper, can you describe your relationship with the defendant prior to October 15th? Eleanor's gaze flickered to Victoria for just a moment. She was my daughter-in-law. My son Marcus married her 3 years ago. Would you characterize your relationship as positive or negative? I tried to make it positive. I welcomed her into our family. I invited her to holidays. I complimented her work on the house, her hosting skills, her career ambitions. I wanted us to be close. And how did the defendant respond to these efforts? Eleanor hesitated. She was polite, cordial, but I always sensed a distance, a wall she had built around herself. Did she ever express any hostility toward you directly? Not in words, not at first, but over time I noticed things. The way she would tense up when I entered a room, the way she would change the subject if Marcus and I were having a conversation, the way she looked at me, sometimes like I was a threat. Torres nodded. Mrs. Harper, can you describe what happened on the evening of October 15th? Eleanor took a deep breath. Victoria watched her mother-in-law gather herself, and for one strange moment, she felt something like admiration. Even after everything, Eleanor maintained her dignity. Victoria asked me to help her get some decorations from the basement. I followed her down the stairs. When I turned around, she grabbed my wrists and shoved me into a cage. Can you describe the cage? It was a large metal dog cage, the kind you use for big breeds. There was a padlock on the door. What happened after she locked you inside? I begged her to let me out. I asked her what she was doing. I told her Marcus would come looking for me. And what did she say? Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. She said she was keeping things perfect. She said she would let me out after the party was over. Then she turned off the lights and left. A sob escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Victoria didn't turn to see who it was. "How long were you in that cage, Mrs. Harper?" "Almost 4 hours." "Can you describe what that experience was like?" Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "It was dark. Completely dark. I couldn't see anything. The concrete floor was cold. I started shivering almost immediately. My joints ached from being cramped in such a small space. I tried to call for help, but no one could hear me over the music." "Did you believe you were going to survive?" The question hung in the air. Eleanor opened her eyes and looked directly at Victoria. "I didn't know. There were moments when I thought I might die down there. Alone. In the dark. While my son danced at a party above my head." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. A wall she had been holding up since her arrest finally gave way. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she made no effort to stop them. "No further questions, Your Honor." 10:48 a.m. Whitfield rose for cross-examination, and Victoria could see the calculation in his eyes. This was the most dangerous part of the trial. Attacking a sympathetic victim could easily backfire. "Mrs. Harper, I'm very sorry for what you went through, truly. Thank you. I just have a few questions to help the jury understand the full context of that evening." Eleanor nodded. "Earlier that day you discovered some financial documents in my client's office. Is that correct?" Eleanor's expression tightened. "Yes." "What did those documents reveal?" "They were letters from collection agencies about credit card debt." "And when you confronted my client about these documents, how did she react?" "She was upset, defensive." "Did she seem frightened?" Torres rose. "Objection. Leading." "Sustained." Whitfield rephrased. "Can you describe my client's emotional state during that conversation?" Eleanor considered the question. "She seemed desperate, panicked, like a cornered animal." "Did she threaten you?" "Not explicitly. But you felt threatened." "I felt concerned. For her, for Marcus, for what might happen if the truth came out. And you told her you were going to inform your son about the debt." "I told her we needed to have a conversation, all three of us, together." "So from my client's perspective, you had discovered her deepest secret and were about to expose it to the one person whose opinion mattered most to her." Torres stood again. "Objection. Counsel is testifying." "Withdrawn." Whitfield paused. "Mrs. Harper, one final question. In all your interactions with my client over the past 3 years, did you ever witness any behavior that suggested she was capable of violence?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "No, I never thought she would hurt me. That's why I followed her into the basement. Because despite everything, I trusted her." The words landed like a physical blow. Victoria bent forward in her chair, overwhelmed by the weight of what she had destroyed. "No further questions." 11:23 a.m. The prosecution called Maria Rodriguez next, the housekeeper who had heard sounds from the basement and been told to ignore them. "Ms. Rodriguez, you were working at the Harper residence on the night of October 15th. "Yes, sir." "Can you describe what happened when you approached the basement door?" Maria's hands twisted in her lap. "I heard something, like someone crying or calling out. I wasn't sure." "What did you do?" "I went to find Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Victoria Harper, to tell her what I heard." "And what was her response?" "She got very angry. She told me I was imagining things. She said the house made strange noises and I should stay away from the basement." "Did she seem nervous or agitated?" "Very much so. Her eyes were wild, like she was scared of something." "Did you believe her explanation about the house noises?" Maria shook her head. "No, sir. I've worked in that house for 2 years. I know what the pipes sound like. What I heard was not pipes." "Why didn't you investigate further?" Maria's face crumpled with guilt. "Because I was afraid. Mrs. Harper, she had a way of making you feel very small, very disposable, I couldn't afford to lose my job. So you did nothing. I did nothing. Maria's voice broke. And I will never forgive myself for that. Victoria stared at the table in front of her. Another person damaged by her actions. Another life touched by her darkness. 12:07 p.m. The prosecution called Marcus Harper to the stand. Victoria hadn't seen her husband since the night of the party. He looked different now, thinner, harder. The warmth that had once defined him had been replaced by something cold and guarded. He took the oath without looking at her. Mr. Harper, can you describe your wife's behavior on the evening of October 15th? She was tense, more tense than usual. She kept checking everything obsessively. The flowers, the lighting, the seating arrangements. Nothing was ever good enough. Did you notice anything unusual about her interactions with your mother? Looking back, yes. She was avoiding her. Whenever my mother entered a room, Victoria found an excuse to leave. When I asked about it, she said she was just stressed about the party. At what point did you realize something was wrong? Marcus's jaw tightened. Multiple people mentioned hearing sounds from the basement. Crying, calling out. At first I thought they were imagining things. Victoria kept telling me it was the old pipes. What changed your mind? Around 11:30 I walked past the basement door and heard my mother's voice, calling my name. What did you do? I confronted Victoria. I demanded she open the door. She refused. She said she didn't have the key. Was that true? No, she had the key in her pocket the entire time. How did you eventually gain access to the basement? I broke down the door, with the help of some guests who had stayed behind. And what did you find? Marcus's composure finally cracked. His voice shook as he answered. I found my mother in a dog cage, shivering, crying. She had been down there for almost 4 hours. Her lips were blue. She could barely speak. What was your reaction? I thought she was dead. For a moment when I first saw her, I thought my mother was dead. Mr. Harper, do you believe your wife intended to harm your mother? Whitfield rose. Objection. Calls for speculation. Overruled. The witness may answer. Marcus finally looked at Victoria. Their eyes met for the first time since the night everything fell apart. I don't know what she intended. I don't think I ever really knew her at all. Washer 34 p.m. The afternoon session brought expert witnesses. A doctor testified about Eleanor's physical condition when she arrived at the hospital. A psychologist explained the lasting effects of trauma on elderly victims. A forensic specialist detailed the evidence collected from the basement. Victoria sat through it all in a daze, watching her life dissected and analyzed by strangers. During a brief recess, Whitfield leaned close. How are you holding up? Does it matter? It matters for the jury. They're watching everything you do. Every reaction, every expression. I'm not performing anymore. I'm done performing. Victoria, your freedom depends on how this jury perceives you. If they see remorse, genuine remorse, it could make a difference. I am remorseful. I've been remorseful since the moment I closed that basement door. Then let them see it. Don't shut down. Don't go numb. Let them see the woman who made a terrible mistake and regrets it with every fiber of her being. Victoria looked at her lawyer. What if that's not enough? Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Then we deal with that when the time comes. 2:15 p.m. The prosecution rested its case at 2:15. Judge Chen announced that the defense would present its case the following morning and adjourned for the day. Victoria was escorted out through a side door to avoid the press gathered outside. Her ankle monitor blinked beneath her pants leg as she climbed into the waiting car. The drive to her hotel was silent. She had moved 3 times since the arrest, each time hoping to escape the reporters and the curious onlookers. Each time they found her. In her room, she sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker to life below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably having dinner with his mother. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives unaware of the woman in the tower who had destroyed everything she touched. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Watched the trial coverage. You looked strong. Keep fighting. Victoria typed back. I don't feel strong. His response came quickly. You are. You always have been. Even when you don't believe it. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that strength had nothing to do with it. She had spent her entire life pretending to be strong while crumbling inside. Look where it had gotten her. But she didn't type any of that. Instead, she wrote, "Thank you, Dad." She set down the phone and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would take the stand. Tomorrow, she would have to explain the unexplainable. Tomorrow, 12 strangers would begin deciding her fate. The next morning, 9:00 a.m. Victoria Harper was called as the first and only witness for the defense. She walked to the stand, feeling like she was approaching her own execution. The oath felt heavy in her mouth. The chair felt like a trap. Whitfield began gently. Mrs. Harper, can you tell the jury about your childhood? Victoria hadn't expected this. She glanced at her lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. I grew up in Queens. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a nurse. She died when I was 12. How did your mother's death affect you? It broke something in me. I spent years trying to fill that void. Trying to prove I was worth something. Trying to earn love because I didn't believe I deserved it any other way. Can you describe your relationship with your mother-in-law? I was intimidated by her. She was everything I wasn't. Warm, genuine, effortlessly loved. People gravitated to her without her having to try. I had to work for every scrap of approval, and she just existed, and everyone adored her. Did you hate her? No, I was terrified of her. She could see through me in ways that no one else could. She knew I was performing. She knew I wasn't really the woman Marcus thought he married. What happened on the night of October 15th that led to your actions? Victoria took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. That morning, Eleanor found letters in my office, debt collection notices. I had been hiding $50,000 in credit card debt from Marcus for over a year. When she confronted me about it, I panicked. I thought she was going to tell him. I thought everything I had built was about to collapse. Did she threaten to expose you? Not exactly. She said we needed to have a conversation, all three of us. But I couldn't face that. I couldn't bear the thought of Marcus looking at me the way Eleanor was looking at me, like I was a fraud, like I was nothing. So what did you do? I lost my mind. Victoria's voice cracked. There's no other way to describe it. I became so consumed by fear that I stopped thinking rationally. All I could see was my life ending, my marriage ending, everything I had worked for disappearing. And you locked your mother-in-law in the basement? Yes. Did you intend to hurt her? No. I swear to you, no. I thought I would let her out after the party. I thought it would only be a few hours. I didn't think about the cold. I didn't think about her health. I didn't think about anything except making sure she couldn't ruin my night. Do you regret what you did? Victoria looked directly at the jury. Tears streamed down her face. I will regret it for the rest of my life, every single day. Eleanor Harper showed me nothing but kindness, and I repaid her with cruelty. I was so afraid of being exposed as a failure that I became something far worse. I became a monster. She turned to face Eleanor, who sat in the gallery beside Marcus. Mrs. Harper, I know you can hear me. I know nothing I say can undo what I did. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Not because I'm on trial. I'm sorry because you deserved better. You deserved a daughter-in-law who appreciated your kindness instead of fearing it. I'm sorry I couldn't be that person. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped scribbling in their notebooks. Victoria turned back to face the jury. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to understand that people can do terrible things without being terrible people. I was broken, I was scared, and I made a choice that I will pay for every day for the rest of my existence, whether I go to prison or not." She took a shuddering breath. "That's all I have to say." 10:42 a.m. Torres approached for cross-examination with barely concealed contempt. "Mrs. Harper, you've painted a very sympathetic picture of yourself. The poor girl from Queens, overwhelmed by insecurity, driven to madness by fear. That's not what I was trying to... Let me ask you something. When you shoved a 68-year-old woman into a cage, did you think about her arthritis?" I wasn't thinking clearly. "When you left her in a cold basement, did you consider that hypothermia could kill her?" I didn't. "When you went back upstairs to your party, did you feel any guilt at all? Or were you too busy accepting compliments on your flower arrangements?" I felt guilty. I felt sick to my stomach. "And yet you didn't let her out." I was afraid. "You were afraid. That seems to be your answer for everything." Torres stepped closer. "Mrs. Harper, do you know what I think? I think you're not sorry you did it. I think you're sorry you got caught." "That's not true." "Really? Because you had 4 hours to change your mind. 4 hours to go down to that basement and let an elderly woman out of a dog cage. But you didn't. You danced. You laughed. You posed for photographs. You did everything except the one thing that might have shown an ounce of human decency." Victoria had no response. Everything he said was true. No further questions. 11:15 a.m. Closing arguments were scheduled for after lunch. Victoria sat in a small conference room with Whitfield unable to eat the sandwich he had ordered for her. "How bad is it?" she asked. "It's not great. Torres did a number on you." "I noticed. But you were honest. The jury saw that. And Eleanor's testimony actually helped in some ways. She said she never thought you were capable of violence. That suggests this was truly out of character." "It doesn't matter. They're going to convict me." "We don't know that." "I know it. I've known it since the night Marcus found her." Victoria pushed the sandwich away. "I just want this to be over." "It will be. Soon." 2:30 p.m. Torres delivered his closing argument with the precision of a surgeon. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defense wants you to believe that Victoria Harper is a victim of her own insecurity, a victim of circumstances beyond her control, a victim who just happened to lock an elderly woman in a dog cage for 4 hours." He shook his head slowly. "Don't let them rewrite this story. Victoria Harper is not a victim. She is a perpetrator. She planned this act. She executed this act. And she showed no remorse until she was caught." He pointed at Victoria. This woman looked at her mother-in-law, a woman who had shown her nothing but kindness, and decided that her social standing was more important than a human being's safety. She made that choice. And now she needs to face the consequences. He turned back to the jury. "Find her guilty. Not because you want revenge, but because justice demands it." 3:15 p.m. Whitfield's closing was more emotional, more personal. "You've heard the prosecution describe my client as a monster, but I want you to remember something. Monsters don't feel remorse. Monsters don't break down crying on the witness stand. Monsters don't beg for forgiveness from the people they've hurt." He walked slowly in front of the jury box. "Victoria Harper made a terrible choice. There's no denying that. But she made that choice in a moment of overwhelming fear and desperation. She was not thinking clearly. She was not acting rationally. She was a woman drowning in her own inadequacy, grasping at anything that might keep her head above water." He paused. "I'm not asking you to excuse what she did. I'm asking you to consider it in context. I'm asking you to remember that punishment should fit the crime, and that the goal of our justice system is not revenge, but rehabilitation." He returned to the defense table and placed a hand on Victoria's shoulder. "Victoria Harper has already lost everything that mattered to her. Her marriage, her reputation, her freedom for all practical purposes. The question before you is not whether she should be punished. She will be. The question is how much punishment is just. He faced the jury one final time. Thank you. 4:47 p.m. The jury was sent to deliberate. Victoria was escorted back to her hotel to wait. The hours crawled by like years. She paced. She tried to sleep. She stared at the wall. Every sound in the hallway made her jump, certain it was someone coming to tell her the verdict. At 9 p.m., her phone rang. Whitfield. They're done for the night. Deliberations will resume tomorrow morning. What does that mean? It could mean anything. A quick verdict usually favors the prosecution. A longer deliberation suggests they're actually weighing the evidence. So this is good news. It's not bad news. Get some sleep if you can. Sleep was impossible. Victoria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the trial in her head. Every question, every answer, every look on the jurors' faces as they absorbed the horror of what she had done. She thought about Eleanor, about the woman she might have become if fear hadn't consumed her, about the family she might have had if she had just been honest from the beginning. She thought about Marcus, about the love they had shared before it curdled into something toxic, about the man he had been when he looked at her with trust instead of disgust. She thought about herself, about the little girl from Queens who had never felt good enough, about the woman who had clawed her way to the top only to discover that the top was a cage of her own making. And somewhere in the darkness between midnight and dawn, Victoria Harper finally understood what she had lost. Not her marriage, not her reputation, not her freedom. She had lost herself. And she wasn't sure she would ever find her way back. The next morning. 9:17 a.m. Victoria sat in the courtroom with her hands folded in her lap, watching the jury file back in. 12 faces. 12 strangers who held her future in their hands. She tried to read their expressions. Were they sympathetic? Disgusted? Undecided? Their faces revealed nothing. Judge Chen addressed the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? A middle-aged man in a blue tie stood. We have your honor. Victoria's heart stopped. Beside her, Whitfield placed a steadying hand on her arm. On the count of false imprisonment, how does the jury find guilty? The word sliced through Victoria like a blade. She heard gasps from the gallery. She heard someone crying. She couldn't tell if it was Eleanor or Jennifer or someone else entirely. On the count of elder abuse, how does the jury find guilty? Victoria gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles turned white. On the count of reckless endangerment, how does the jury find guilty? 3 counts. Guilty on all 3. Victoria felt the room tilt sideways. Whitfield's hand tightened on her arm. The defendant will remain in custody pending sentencing, Judge Chen announced. Sentencing hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Victoria turned to look at the gallery one last time. Marcus sat rigid, his face unreadable. Jennifer was crying. And Eleanor was looking directly at her. Their eyes met across the crowded courtroom. Victoria expected to see triumph in her mother-in-law's gaze, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like sorrow. Then the bailiff was at her side, and she was being led away in handcuffs, and the moment was gone. 10:45 a.m. Marcus walked out of the courthouse into a swarm of reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward his face. Questions exploded from every direction. Mr. Harper, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you be at the sentencing hearing? Have you filed for divorce? He pushed through the crowd without answering, his arm wrapped protectively around his mother. Jennifer ran interference, shouting at reporters to give them space. They reached the car and climbed inside, slamming the doors against the chaos. Are you okay, Mom? Eleanor nodded slowly. I'm fine. I'm just tired. We'll get you home. You can rest. Marcus. Eleanor turned to face her son. I need to tell you something. What is it? I'm not happy about this. Marcus stared at her. What do you mean she was convicted? She's going to prison. I know, and she deserves consequences for what she did. But I didn't want this. I didn't want to watch her life destroyed even after what she did to me. Mom, she locked you in a cage. I know what she did. I lived it. Eleanor's voice was firm but gentle. But vengeance doesn't heal anything. It just creates more broken people. Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had spent the past 3 weeks nursing his anger, feeding it, letting it grow into something that felt almost righteous. The conviction had seemed like justice. Now his mother was telling him it felt like something else entirely. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. I want you to find peace. Not for her sake, for yours. The car pulled away from the courthouse, leaving the reporters behind. 2 weeks later. 3:22 p.m. Victoria sat in her cell at the Women's Detention Center reading a letter from her father. He wrote every day, even when she didn't respond. He told her about the weather in Queens, about the neighbor's new dog, about the Mets game he watched last night. He never mentioned the trial. He never mentioned the verdict. He just wrote every single day, reminding her that someone in the world still cared whether she lived or died. She folded the letter and tucked it under her pillow with the others. A guard appeared at her cell door. Harper, you have a visitor. Victoria frowned. Whitfield had been here yesterday. Her father wasn't due until Saturday. Who else would come? She followed the guard to the visitation room and stopped cold when she saw who was waiting for her. Eleanor Harper sat at a small table, her hands folded in front of her, her expression calm and unreadable. Victoria couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the floor. This had to be a mistake, a hallucination. Eleanor couldn't be here. The restraining order prevented. I got special permission from the court, Eleanor said, as if reading her thoughts. I asked to see you. Why? Because I needed to say something to you, something I couldn't say in a courtroom. Victoria approached the table slowly, half expecting Eleanor to disappear like a mirage. She sat down across from her mother-in-law, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. I'm not here to yell at you, Eleanor said. I'm not here to tell you how much you hurt me. You already know that. Then why are you here? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. I've been thinking about you a lot these past few weeks, trying to understand how someone could do what you did, trying to find the monster everyone kept telling me you were. Victoria flinched at the word. Monster. It was what she had called herself 100 times. But I couldn't find it, Eleanor continued. Every time I looked for the monster, all I could see was a frightened woman who had lost her way. I don't understand. I forgive you, Victoria. The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears. You can't, she whispered. After what I did. I can, and I do. Eleanor reached across the table and took Victoria's hands in hers. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what you did. It's about freeing myself from the burden of carrying hatred. I refuse to let that night define the rest of my life, and I refuse to let it define yours. Victoria broke down completely. Sobs racked her body as 3 weeks of suppressed emotion came flooding out. She cried for the woman she had hurt. She cried for the life she had destroyed. She cried for the little girl from Queens who had spent 40 years trying to be good enough and had ended up here. Eleanor held her hands through all of it, steady and patient, like an anchor in a storm. When Victoria finally caught her breath, she looked up at her mother-in-law with swollen eyes. I don't deserve this. Probably not, but that's not the point. What is the point? The point is that you have a choice now. You can let this destroy you, or you can let it transform you. I've chosen to believe you're capable of transformation. Why? Why would you believe that after everything? Eleanor smiled sadly. Because I'm a teacher. I spent 30 years watching children make mistakes and learn from them. I've seen the worst behavior turn into the best character. I've seen lost causes find their way. She squeezed Victoria's hands. You're not a lost cause, Victoria. You're just lost. And lost people can be found. 4:47 p.m. After Eleanor left, Victoria sat alone in her cell for hours staring at the wall. Forgiveness. She had never expected it. She had never dared to hope for it. And now that she had it, she didn't know what to do with it. She thought about what Eleanor had said. You have a choice now. You can let this destroy you, or you can let it transform you. For the first time since her arrest, Victoria felt something other than despair. It was small, fragile, barely there at all. But it was something. Hope. She pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. Dear Eleanor, I don't have words adequate enough to thank you for what you gave me today. Your forgiveness is a gift I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. I've spent so many years building walls around myself, trying to protect a version of me that never really existed. I was so afraid of being seen that I became someone who couldn't see anyone else. You saw me. Even when I was at my worst, you saw me. And instead of turning away, you offered grace. I don't know what's going to happen at my sentencing. I don't know how long I'll be in prison. But I know one thing for certain, I am going to use this time to become someone worthy of the second chance you've given me. Not for applause, not for admiration, not for anyone's approval, but my own. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Victoria Sentencing Day, 10:00 a.m. The courtroom was quieter this time. Fewer reporters, fewer spectators. The spectacle had moved on to fresher scandals. Victoria stood before Judge Chen, her hands clasped in front of her, her heart racing. Mrs. Harper, you have been found guilty of false imprisonment, elder abuse, and reckless endangerment. Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything to say? Victoria took a deep breath. Your Honor, I stand before you today not to make excuses but to take responsibility. What I did to Eleanor Harper was cruel, thoughtless, and unforgivable by any reasonable standard. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I spent my entire life chasing approval. I believed that if I could just be perfect enough, successful enough, admirable enough, I would finally feel worthy of love. Instead, I destroyed the people who offered me love freely. She looked at Eleanor, who sat in the gallery with Marcus beside her. Mrs. Harper came to visit me last week. She offered me something I never expected and certainly didn't deserve. She offered me forgiveness. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what I did, but I do know that her grace has changed something in me. I am not the same woman who walked into that basement on October 15th. I am broken, yes, but broken things can be rebuilt. She turned back to the judge. Whatever sentence you give me, I will accept, not as punishment, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to become someone worthy of the second chance I've been given. An opportunity to prove that people can change. An opportunity to finally stop performing and start living. She took a shaky breath. That's all I have to say, Your Honor. Judge Chen studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Harper, I have presided over many cases in my career. Very few defendants have demonstrated the level of genuine remorse I have witnessed from you today. Victoria felt a tiny spark of hope. However, the judge continued, remorse does not erase the severity of your actions. You locked an elderly woman in a cage for nearly 4 hours. You left her in a cold basement while you celebrated above her head. You showed a callous disregard for human dignity that cannot go unpunished. The spark flickered and died. Taking into account the victim's testimony, the recommendation of the prosecution, and your genuine expressions of remorse, I hereby sentence you to 2 years in a residential rehabilitation facility, followed by 3 years of probation. You will complete mandatory psychological treatment, perform 500 hours of community service with elderly populations, and maintain no contact with the victim without her explicit consent. 2 years. Not prison, a rehabilitation facility. Victoria's knees nearly buckled with relief. Additionally, the judge added, I am ordering you to write a letter of apology to be read at an elder abuse awareness conference, sharing your story as a warning to others who might follow a similar path. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. 10:34 a.m. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Marcus waited for his mother while Jennifer went to get the car. That was more lenient than I expected, he said quietly. It was fair, Eleanor replied. She needed help, not a cage of her own. Marcus winced at the irony. Mom, how are you not angry? How are you not screaming for more punishment? Eleanor turned to face her son. Because punishment wasn't going to heal me, and it wasn't going to heal her. The only thing that heals is choosing to move forward. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to forgive her, Marcus. That's my choice, not yours. But I hope you can find a way to release the anger. It's eating you alive. He looked away, his jaw tight. She was my wife. I loved her. And she was capable of that. Yes. And she was also capable of genuine remorse. People are complicated. They contain multitudes. Eleanor touched his arm. The question isn't whether she's good or evil. The question is whether you're going to let what she did define the rest of your life. Marcus didn't answer. He wasn't ready to answer. But somewhere beneath the anger, something shifted. A tiny crack in the wall he had built around his heart. 6 months later. The Fairfield Women's Rehabilitation Center sat on a quiet hill overlooking Long Island Sound. Victoria had been here for half a year now, following a strict routine of therapy group sessions and community work. She woke every morning at 5:30. She made her bed with military precision. She ate breakfast in the common room with women who had committed crimes far worse than hers, and women who had committed crimes far less. She learned their stories. A mother who had embezzled money to pay for her daughter's cancer treatment. A teacher who had snapped after years of abuse from her husband. A young woman who had made one terrible decision while high and would pay for it the rest of her life. They were all broken in different ways. They were all trying to put themselves back together. Victoria worked in the facility's garden 3 days a week, pulling weeds and planting vegetables that would be donated to local food banks. She attended therapy sessions twice a week, digging into the childhood wounds she had spent her entire adult life avoiding. She wrote letters to Eleanor once a month. Eleanor wrote back. Their correspondence had become something Victoria treasured more than anything else in her life. Eleanor shared stories about her garden, her book club, her volunteer work at the library. Victoria shared her progress in therapy, her struggles with self-forgiveness, her growing understanding of who she truly was beneath all the performance. She never asked about Marcus. Eleanor never mentioned him, until one day she did. Dear Victoria, Marcus asked about you yesterday. He wanted to know if you were doing well. I told him you were. He didn't say anything else, but I could see he was relieved. I know you don't expect anything from him, but I wanted you to know that anger doesn't last forever. Even the deepest wounds can heal, given enough time. With hope, Eleanor Victoria read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He asked about her. After everything, he still cared enough to ask. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. A tiny thread of connection to the life she had destroyed. She would take it. 1 year later. Victoria's release date arrived on a cold December morning. She walked out of the facility with a small bag of belongings and a heart full of equal parts hope and terror. Her father waited in the parking lot, leaning against his old pickup truck, just like he used to when he picked her up from school. His hair had gone grayer. His face had more lines, but his eyes were the same. Warm, steady, loving. Hey, kid. Hey, Dad. He pulled her into a hug that said everything words couldn't. I'm proud of you. I'm glad you're okay. I never stopped believing in you. Victoria held on tight, breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and Old Spice. For the first time in over a year, she felt safe. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "I don't have a home anymore." "Sure you do. Same place you've always had one." He squeezed her shoulder. "Queen's baby. The neighborhood's been waiting for you." Victoria climbed into the truck, and they drove away from the facility, away from the past, toward something that felt almost like a future. 3 years later. Victoria stood at a podium in the ballroom of the Hartford Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 500 people. Social workers, therapists, police officers, families of elder abuse victims. This was the conference Judge Chen had ordered her to speak at. 3 years ago it had seemed like a punishment. Now it felt like a purpose. "My name is Victoria Wells." She began using her maiden name. "And 3 years ago, I locked my mother-in-law in a dog cage." The audience shifted uncomfortably. She had expected that. "I'm not telling you this to shock you. I'm telling you because I believe the most powerful weapon against abuse is truth. And the truth about my story is that I never saw myself as an abuser. I saw myself as a victim of my own insecurity, a victim of circumstances beyond my control, a victim who just happened to hurt someone else while trying to protect herself." She paused, letting the words sink in. That's the lie abuse tells. It convinces us that our pain justifies our actions. It convinces us that we're the real victims. It convinces us that the person we're hurting somehow deserves it. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as she could. "The woman I locked in that cage was 68 years old. She had arthritis. She had survived cancer. She had spent 30 years teaching children and 15 years raising her son alone. She had never done anything to hurt me except exist, and I punished her for that." Victoria's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "She forgave me. I still don't fully understand why, but she did. And her forgiveness taught me something that all the therapy and rehabilitation in the world couldn't teach me. It taught me that I was worthy of grace. Not because of what I had done, but in spite of it." She took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm asking you to understand that abusers are not monsters. They're people. Broken, frightened, desperate people who have lost their way. And if we want to stop abuse, we need to address the brokenness. We need to create systems that catch people before they fall. We need to teach emotional intelligence alongside math and reading. We need to normalize asking for help before it's too late." She stepped back from the podium. "I will never undo what I did. I will never stop regretting it. But I can use my story to help others. And that's what I intend to do for the rest of my life." The audience applauded. Not enthusiastically, not standing, but genuinely. It was more than Victoria had expected. It was more than she deserved. After the speech, a woman approached her in the hallway. Middle-aged, tired eyes, hands that wouldn't stop moving. "Ms. Wells, I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" "For being honest. My sister. She did something similar to our mother. Locked her in a closet during a family reunion. We all pretended it didn't happen. We never talked about it. And now Mom is gone, and my sister is still the same broken person she always was." Victoria nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. I'm going to talk to her. After hearing your story, I'm going to try to get her help. That's all any of us can do. Try." The woman squeezed Victoria's hand and walked away. Victoria watched her go, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. A sense that maybe, just maybe, the worst thing she had ever done could somehow lead to something good. 5 years later. Victoria sat in a small cafe in Boston, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. Across from her sat Eleanor Harper. It was their first face-to-face meeting since the visit to the detention center. They had written letters for years. They had spoken on the phone a few times. But seeing each other in person felt different, heavier, more real. "You look good," Eleanor said. "So do you." "I'm 73 years old. I look exactly like that." Despite everything, Victoria laughed. It felt strange in her mouth, like a language she was relearning. How's the nonprofit going? Eleanor asked. Slowly. We're trying to set up support groups for people who have committed abuse, places where they can get help before they hurt someone, or after, if they're trying to change. Funding is hard to find. Not many donors want to help abusers. It's important work. I hope so. Victoria hesitated. Eleanor, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret it? Forgiving me. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. I've asked myself that many times over the years, and the answer is always the same. No, I don't regret it. Why not? Because forgiving you freed me. It allowed me to move forward with my life, instead of being trapped in that basement forever. She reached across the table and touched Victoria's hand. And because I believe in second chances. I always have. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've given me. You don't have to thank me. Just keep becoming who you're meant to be. They talked for another hour, about Eleanor's garden, about Victoria's work, about the small joys and daily struggles that made up an ordinary life. When they finally stood to leave, Eleanor pulled her into a hug. Victoria held on tight, breathing in the moment, memorizing the feeling. Eleanor, she said as they pulled apart. Yes. How's Marcus? Eleanor smiled softly. He's healing, slowly. He got remarried last year. A lovely woman named Sarah. They're expecting a baby in the spring. Victoria absorbed this information. It hurt, but not as much as she expected. Marcus had moved on. He had found happiness. That was more than she had any right to hope for. I'm glad, she said, and meant it. He asked about you, you know, when I told him I was meeting you today. Victoria's breath caught. What did he say? He said to tell you he hopes you found peace. The words washed over her like warm water. Not forgiveness exactly, not reconciliation, but something close to closure. Tell him I have, Victoria said, or at least I'm getting there. Epilogue. 7 years after the night of the party. Victoria stood at the podium of the National Elder Care Conference, looking out at an audience of over 2,000 people. The organization she had founded, Second Chances, had grown beyond anything she had imagined. They operated support groups in 15 states. They had helped hundreds of people get treatment before their pain became someone else's tragedy. She thought about the woman she had been 7 years ago. The desperate, frightened, broken woman who had locked her mother-in-law in a cage because she couldn't face her own inadequacy. That woman was gone. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but transformed into someone new. Someone who had learned that worthiness wasn't something you earned. It was something you claimed. Someone who had learned that the only approval that mattered was your own. Someone who had learned that rock bottom wasn't the end of the story. It was just the place where you stopped falling and started climbing. She began her speech. 7 years ago, I committed an unforgivable act. I locked an elderly woman in a dog cage because I was afraid of being exposed as a fraud. I thought I was protecting myself. Instead, I destroyed everything I had ever cared about. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the audience. But here's what I've learned in the years since. Destruction isn't the end. It's an opportunity. An opportunity to rebuild from the ground up. To create something stronger, truer, more authentic than anything that existed before. She thought about Eleanor watching from the front row. About her father who had never stopped believing in her. About the thousands of people she had helped through her organization. I am not the same woman who walked into that basement 7 years ago. I am someone new. Someone who has earned her own respect through hard work, honest reflection, and genuine change. She straightened her shoulders. Some of you may think that people who commit abuse don't deserve second chances. I understand that perspective. But I believe something different. I believe that redemption is possible for anyone who is willing to do the work. I believe that our worst moments don't have to define us. I believe that broken people can become whole again. She looked directly at Eleanor, who smiled back at her with tears in her eyes. "I am living proof of that belief, and I will spend the rest of my life helping others find their own path to redemption." The audience rose to their feet applauding. Victoria stood at the podium accepting the recognition, but knowing that the applause wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was the work. What mattered was the change. What mattered was becoming finally the person she was always meant to be. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, honest, free. After the conference, Victoria walked out into the cool evening air. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset. The city hummed with life all around her. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Eleanor. "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for showing me that grace is possible. Thank you for teaching me that the cage I needed to escape wasn't made of steel. It was made of fear. And the only key was the courage to finally let go." She hit send and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Then she walked forward into the gathering dusk, leaving the past behind her, carrying only the lessons it had taught. Victoria Harper had locked a woman in a cage and lost everything. Victoria Wells had set herself free and gained something far more valuable: a life worth living, a purpose worth pursuing, a heart finally capable of giving and receiving love. The woman who had craved perfection had discovered something infinitely more precious. The woman who had feared being seen had finally found the courage to be known. And the woman who had believed she would never be enough had learned at last that she always was. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become the source of our greatest wisdom. Some mistakes can never be undone, but they can become the foundation of our deepest growth. And some cages once escaped teach us the true meaning of freedom. Not the absence of consequences, but the presence of choice. Not the approval of others, but the acceptance of self. Not the performance of perfection, but the practice of becoming. Victoria Wells had been locked in a cage of her own making for most of her life. Now finally, she was free.